We are at the St. Rose Cemetery in Chicopee, Massachusetts. This cemetery was started in 1910, and the church itself is about a half-mile away. It's on Groton Street, the St. Rose Church, and the neighborhood is called Aldenville neighborhood of Chicopee. And it was a mission church of the Nativity Church, which is down on Chicopee Street in the Willimantic section of Chicopee. And they had more and more French Canadians come up to this area. It became a trolley neighborhood, and it grew and grew greatly through the 1890s and 1900s. And so the church grew to such proportions that they grew away from the Nativity Church and got their own church going and their own cemetery. And so you have a beautiful cemetery in this neighborhood, and only one and only French Canadian based cemetery in Chicopee. All right, so what did French Canadians of Chicopee do before 1910 when the cemetery was made? From 1890 to 1910, they were buried in Notre Dame Cemetery of South Hadley. Before that, they were buried in the St. Jerome Cemetery, the Calvary Cemetery, St. Jerome's of Holyoke and Calvary of Chicopee. So this is the start of it, and the gates are in the distance, and we're going to go around each quadrant in this introduction, and I'm going to point out what each section has. So next quadrant over here. Okay, in the distance, there's the pauper section in this section. Pauper section means that you have people that are very poor being buried because they didn't have any money. They'd be buried in one section, usually paid by a fraternal group or by the church. You also have next to it the baby section. That's where non-baptized babies are, and we're going to have a stop over there after this introduction. And you can see the very many babies buried there. Even 100 years ago, they were still dying because of diseases, and they have their own section. Now, as of last year, there's a new section back there for veterans, and we'll visit that also, where you can have there's poems on there, and there's veterans that pay to have bricks put into the ground over that section. So the next section over here. Down this road in the far distance, you have a second priest circle, and those priests are usually priests from the two other French Canadian churches in Chicopee, because those two churches also use this cemetery. That's why it's a very large cemetery. Not only the St. Rose Church used this, but also the St. George Church of Chicopee Falls neighborhood uses this. And the Nativity Church of Willimantic neighborhood also uses this. So some of their priests are buried in the secondary priest circle that are further to the west of this big cemetery. So further on, okay, in this section here, many family stones, many parishioners love to be buried here, and then there's a lot of French Canadian names around Beauchamp, Laflin, and Basset. The chapel, all right, the chapel and the administration section will veer on to the next, and so we're going to look this direction, and there's a brown brick building over there. The middle section is a chapel. And in that chapel, you're going to have a little service before the burial, and they can combine the two into an administration, and then the chapel right in the middle. So it's a great idea to build it all together. And Now, at this stop, you can see that it is a neighborhood in the background. Like all cemeteries, you've got a neighborhood around it. In the distance, about a little under a half mile away, is the church itself. In front of us is the founding pastor of St. Rose, and that'll be a separate stop. And one more thing to point out, right behind us is a beautiful circle inside of a church cross. It says La Croix du Salut, the cross of health. And inside of it, you have pastor graves. There's 6 of them, and these are some of the pastors that 123-year history of this parish have served the great St. Rose Church. And we're going to have one stop there pointing them out. Thank you for coming on this instruction.